Hey everybody, Noah from ExtremeTerrain here. In this video, we're going to dive into what you need to know when you shop for cold air intakes for your 3.5 liter Tacoma. There are so many variations and options to consider when it comes to cold air intakes, but pretty much every cold air intake is designed to get rid of the factory air restrictions and increase throttle response, torque, and horsepower, as well as sound. But they come in different sizes, shapes, and materials. How are you supposed to know which one is a good fit for you? Well, I'm going to break everything you need to know down into three main categories, and all the information I'm going to go over isn't generation or motor specific either. This really is going to apply to all intakes out there for the 3.5 liter Tacoma in general. Now, one thing to note before we dive in is that the 3.5 liter Tacoma doesn't need a tune when you install a cold air intake, and I'm not going to speak towards tune versus no tune required. However, installing a tune to support a cold air intake is always a great idea, and doing so is really going to maximize the performance increase that a cold air intake has to offer. Hopefully, by the end of the video, you'll have a good idea of what to look for when you shop for cold air intakes for your Tacoma. Let's start with the first category, construction. One of the first things you're going to notice when you start shopping for cold air intakes is the different construction materials out there. The two that you're really going to see a lot are plastic and metal. Both have their advantages over the other, but we're going to start with plastic. Plastic intakes are starting to pop up all over the place, and they've really become popular in today's aftermarket parts scene. A lot of plastic intakes, like the InGen Evolution, are made from high-density roto-molded polyethylene, and that means the intake tube has a really smooth finish, it weighs almost nothing, and they're still strong and durable. And with some of the other options out there, you'll notice that the intake tube isn't one continuous shape all the way to the filter as well. So that's because plastic is molded, and you can get some more complex and more limitless designs that are pretty impossible to achieve from metal. The InGen Evolution doesn't have any super complex bends, but the airbox is molded to fit in the engine bay space perfectly with no gaps between the sides, and it's got this full duct that runs across the top of the shroud. Plastic intakes tend to have a better fit overall because of the intricacy possible in the construction process. Plastic also doesn't absorb as much heat as metal, so a plastic intake is going to be a great way to keep intake air temperatures down. However, plastic won't withstand even close to the same height of temperature as a metal intake, but I would say if your engine bay is getting hot enough to melt your plastic intake, you've definitely got other problems. With the InGen Evolution, everything from the intake tube to the airbox itself is made of plastic, and that's going to help keep costs down as well. Maybe you've heard or even bought into the stigma of cheap plastic, but that simply isn't true. Heavy-duty plastic intakes are really awesome, and they hold their own in the realm of options out there. Metal intakes can come in a variety of finishes and designs, but most are really going to look similar to the K&N Blackhawk cold air intake shown here. This intake kind of sets the bar, in my opinion, of what a metal intake should look like. It's a simple intake tube with no complex bends or anything like that, and an airbox that's bent out of a sheet of metal to fit in its place. Metal intakes are typically mandrel bent, which means the tubing past the filter is bent in a way that doesn't make ribs or pinches in the material, which could ultimately slow your airflow down. With intakes, you want as little air resistance as possible, so mandrel bent tubing is one of the great features of a metal intake. Metal intakes, like the Blackhawk, are typically constructed out of aluminum all the way from the airbox to the motor. Aluminum is lightweight, it's strong, and it's seriously heat resistant. It takes a long time for aluminum to heat up, so it's a great material to make cold air intakes out of. However, once it heats up, aluminum takes a while to cool back down, and in general, metal is going to hold heat much longer than plastic. Aluminum is going to be stronger than plastic when it's hot, but again, there really shouldn't be a scenario where the intake gets hot enough to melt. Both plastic and aluminum are going to do a great job under the hood of a car, but where aluminum really shines is when you polish it. See what I did there? All jokes aside, you can't polish black plastic to a chrome mirror finish. Aluminum can be polished to a shine, as well as painted glossy in pretty much any color you want, and it's a more limitless material than plastic in terms of finishes and textures. They aren't usually much more expensive than plastic, but metal intakes do tend to ride slightly higher in price than the plastic options. Regardless of the construction material, the biggest factor that's going to play into getting your cold air to the motor is the airbox design. The airbox can make or break the heat management of an intake, as well as keep the filter clean or not. Now, depending on the purpose of your vehicle, you're really going to want to choose between two different airbox styles, open or closed. Open airboxes are a great cost-effective option, and they function similarly to a heat shield. They're still going to block heat from the engine, but they aren't going to completely enclose the filter. A lot of open air boxes available out there look and function just like this K&N Series 77, where the airbox has gasket material around the top and it seals to the inside of the hood. Then the bottom of the airbox mates up to the lower half of the factory airbox, and they sit together as a nice solid unit. Yes, the airbox does seal up against the hood, but it's not sealed up tight like a closed airbox would be. The big factor to consider when you're picking an airbox design is really what you use your Tacoma for. If you're on a dusty road or a really muddy and gross trail all the time, then an open airbox probably isn't a great idea for you. All that debris can make its way into the airbox since it's not fully sealed, and you can end up having to clean your filter a lot, and it can be a mess. But if you're looking to keep your truck on the road, then an open airbox is going to keep air cool, it's going to be more affordable because there's less material, and it'll allow air to flow into the filter restriction-free. Also, purely for looks, being able to see a nice colored filter like this one out in the open looks really cool. Closed air boxes are going to be your best bet at keeping hot air away from the filter, and they're going to be perfect for someone looking to either do some off-roading or get the best heat management possible. The S&B cold air intake is incredibly popular, and there's actually over 400 reviews on this particular intake on our site. This airbox is fully closed with an inlet on the side that connects to where the factory airbox would on the fender for a feed of fresh air. The lid is fully sealed with a gasket around the edges, so hot air in the engine bay can't make its way into the airbox. This design is going to be incredibly effective at heat management, and it's also the best design in terms of filter protection. With a closed airbox like the S&B has, debris and dirt really can't make its way into the filter easily, and the filter is going to stay clean for much longer. And with the S&B specifically, you can still see how the filter is looking because the lid is clear with that nice little logo on it. With more material that's required to make a closed box comes typically a higher price. Closed air boxes are going to cost a little bit more than open ones depending on the brand because the airbox is larger and it just has more parts to it. The last category we're going to look at has to do with the filters themselves. There are two main kinds of filters, and those are going to be oiled or dry. Oiled filters have a sticky oil applied to the filter media, and that's meant to catch smaller particulates and keep them from passing through the filter. Oiled filters are also unique because they're washable. You can just clean them in the sink with water and re-oil them when they get dirty. That means oiled filters are doubly protecting your motor, but also your wallet as well. You might find yourself wondering why every filter isn't just oiled then. Well, you could imagine that a sticky filter would get way more dirty more often, and that's totally true. Oiled filters require more maintenance than dry filters because they get gunked up easier, which means you'll be removing them and cleaning them more frequently, especially if you're in a dusty or sandy area. The K&N Series 63 Air Charger cold air intake has an oiled filter. Now that means this intake is going to be tailored to someone who's using it on the daily drive and looking for some added protection to go along with their upgraded intake. An oiled filter will work great for keeping small road typical particulates from passing through the filter. Yes, the filter on the Series 63 intake will get dirty more often than a dry filter, but an average amount of road dirt isn't going to force you to clean the filter all the time. As far as dry filters go, something like this rough country cold air intake is definitely going to be a better fit for the off-road enthusiast. A dry filter like the one on this intake isn't going to collect a ton of dirt, so it's great in a much more dirty environment. You'll notice that the airbox on this intake is similar to the one on the Series 63, except for the fact that it's more closed and protective of the filter. When you don't have the oil as a backup, typically you're going to see dry filters go hand in hand with the more enclosed open airbox to keep large amounts of dirt away. If you're just one of those people that love to bury your Tacoma in sand or mud, then a dry filter would be a great thing for you. Also, a dry filter is going to work well with a pre-filter bag, which is going to act similarly to the oil on a filter as another level of protection, but it's not going to hold on to any debris. This intake specifically doesn't come with a pre-filter bag, but they are available on our site as well if that's something you feel like you want to add to your new intake. So hopefully by now you have a better idea on what to look for when you're shopping for cold air intakes for your 3.5 liter Tacoma. And again, everything that I talked about doesn't just apply to these specific intakes that we showcased, but any intake you're looking at in general for your truck. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to Extreme Terrain and leave a comment to let us know which intake that you like the best. We also have all the intakes you saw in this video in stock on our site, as well as tons of other parts for your rig. For all things Tacoma, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.